Now, two primary people who are remembered in Black History Month are Bob Marley and Malcolm X. If these two men were totally on our side, Babylon would never put their picture on a stamp, a coin, or a street to remember them. Some Western cities even have a designated day. They are being honored because what they did was of more benefit to the white race than to the African, even though it appears to be the opposite. For all of what these men so-called got accomplished, it all benefited the white man and created the environment for us to show more respect to him instead of dealing with him like the beast he really is. It's ironic that after these two men come to us with a mouthful, they then go to the white man or the white woman seeking refuge, comfort, and support. Today in Jamaica, streets are named after Bob Marley, and now there is talk about making him a national hero. Well, before we start adding to the National Heroes Board, we should be focusing on removing some who's already there. People like Bustamante, Manley, and Gordon. A survey of the Jamaican people should be undertaken to separate and categorize those who were hanged from those who supported the people that hung them. Heroship is about your life. Either you lost it fighting the enemy or you lived it morally. Bob did neither. Bob left his black wife in Jamaica, went to New York, and there with a white woman. Him breed the white woman and then come back to Jamaica for there with him black wife again. No wonder our enemies give musical awards to Bob and his children. They can relate. They do not feel threatened by their Humpty Dumpty music of today. Bob can sing and does sing a good song, but being a good singer cannot be the criteria for heroship. Some say Bob placed Jamaica on the map, but to whose benefit? It benefited the Jamaica private sector owned by half-breeds. It benefited the Jamaica hotel industry owned by half-breeds. It benefited half-breed exporters who could fill a container with tons of ganja. Half-breeds and their relatives own the airlines and cruise ships, and those who cater to them and others all benefited except the everyday Jamaican people whose local craft market is bypassed by all except those who live on the island. Now, while Bob's songs make a lot of sense, whenever he speaks, his language goes straight into the Bible for support and backup. Yeah, straight into the Bible. And based on what we know today about the lifestyle of some of those that Bob holds in high esteem, we don't want to continue elevating these vicious and murderous men. King David is one of those murderous characters. If the life of the individual is not on the line, where it was taken from them by the enemy, then their character must be used to justify their elevation in our community. That character will always be on our wall of fame for generations to admire, to emulate, and to reproduce. Bob's life was not taken from him in his quest for liberation. Maybe he got that cancer while he was committing adultery. Bob died as he preferred to live. He had a choice, but he chose to visit and subsequently died in the hands of a white man claiming to be a doctor looking out for his interest. That was poor judgment on his part and a poor example he was setting for us. He should have known never to trust the white man. However, he did because he's made up of 50% whiteness. Bob Marley is a very good singer. But let's leave him in that position. That's where he belongs. He must not be elevated to that of a moral teacher or a revolutionary freedom fighter of our people, because that's not where his mind was at. So now we come to Malcolm X and the question of racial loyalty. So now we come to Malcolm X and the question of racial loyalty. After the murder of his father Earl by white supremacists when he was just 6 years old, and the slow but obvious mental demise of his mother Louise by the age of 13, Malcolm was free to roam the streets of Harlem whenever he pleased. This lack of parental supervision soon got him in trouble on petty charges and he was sent to jail. In jail, he had time to think. Whilst in prison, he observed members of the Black Nation of Islam visiting and teaching the mostly black inmates about self-awareness and community development. The nation was founded by Elijah Muhammad, who preached his own version of Islam to his followers. He taught that black people were the original human being and that white people were an evil offshoot race that oppresses black people. He preached that the Nation of Islam's goal was to free black people from mental slavery. Now, when Malcolm heard this, it was as if these teachings unlocked a section of his brain that had become dormant after the death of his father, who was a Garveyite, and the subsequent mental confinement of his mother, who was also a Garveyite. So it should not be surprising to anyone that Malcolm sought out Elijah Muhammad as soon as he was released from prison. His real character, implanted and nurtured by his parents, that was covered over with garbage, heaped upon his young brain by a system of white supremacy, was now getting cleaned up. When Malcolm joined the Black Nation of Islam, he joined an organization that was already fully functional. There were over 130 mosques, between 40 to 50,000 members who had uniforms. Meetings were kept, dues were collected, recruitment and training was ongoing, and spiritual services were held. The organization also ran various businesses like barber and tailor shops, dry cleaners. They planted crops, owned land and air transport systems, published a newspaper, and sold various other products, including their specialty, the bean pie. They had a bank, schools, grocery stores, and restaurants in over 47 states in America. This was the organization Malcolm came into in 1952, and if he did not, it could have remained a semi-secret black power organization for a long time. Minister Muhammad was very wise, very reserved and knowledgeable. He was also security conscious and had no interest in the white media. In contrast, the younger Malcolm wanted to tell our story on TV. Malcolm excelled in the nation and became their #1 man. He grew the organization to great heights due to the content and manner in which he spoke. He informed the black population about their Africanness and about the brutality of white folks during slavery and afterwards. He would refer to white folks as devils, and he got this classification from Elijah Muhammad. So, after a number of years with Elijah Muhammad and the Black Nation of Islam, Malcolm felt the urge to broaden his scope. To do this, he stood on the shoulders of what was already accomplished through civil rights in America. Elijah, some concluded, was at his peak at the civil rights level, and since he started with no rights, achieving civil rights was a great feat. Malcolm, while standing on civil rights, had the state of mind to expand and concluded that human rights should be the next hurdle in our struggle because it included not just Africans born in America, but Africans born everywhere. Well, after a few good years in the Nation of Islam, Malcolm had a disagreement with Elijah Muhammad regarding certain comments he made about the death of President Kennedy, even though he was advised not to make any comments. This resulted in him leaving the Nation of Islam in 1964 and setting up his own mosque. He called it Muslim Mosque Inc., and he also established the Organization of Afro-American Unity. There was only one problem. He was still living in Queens at the house provided him and his family by the nation. And when asked to vacate, he either refused or didn't move fast enough. Well, one night the house was firebombed and he barely made it out alive with his family. He felt the bombing was the work of Elijah Muhammad and the nation because he didn't move out. In the meantime, whether he was aware or not, the FBI and the CIA was monitoring his movements. They were familiar with his African Development Program. They had already deported Marcus Garvey, who taught his teacher, Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad was a corporal in the UNIA. Now, the FBI and the CIA saw Malcolm not only addressing the problems of black people in America, but those in Africa as well, and connecting them. They also knew that he had an upcoming arrangement to make a speech at the United Nations regarding exploitation and the lack of human rights in Africa at the hands and feet of Europeans. The CIA and the FBI didn't want him to deliver that speech, which represented 34 different African countries. And when he visited these places, he found out that the people had a common problem. And when he examined the cause of that problem, he found out that the white man was the cause of all their problems. In his travels, Malcolm realized that the white man was an equal opportunity exploiter and killer. And he planned to explain all of this at the United Nations in a manner which we all know would be very explosive and powerful. So, to prevent his speech at the UN, the FBI and the CIA took advantage of the split between Malcolm and Elijah and firebombed his apartment with the intention of killing him, knowing full well that the Nation of Islam would surely get the blame. Well, Malcolm didn't die, but the nation got the blame. Malcolm, thinking it was the nation, came out swinging. It's all on YouTube. He made a number of references about the private life of Elijah Muhammad, about how he was behaving immorally with a number of young sisters in the mosque, even having children with some of them and not supporting them or the children. Now, if he was having this conversation with senior members of the nation or even his family, that would be a different matter. However, he was providing this information to the white press in his attempt to publicly discredit Mr. Muhammad, who he believed was the one trying to kill him and his family. Here he was making voluntary derogatory accusations to the white man on TV about Mr. Muhammad, disregarding the fact that the white man does not like either him or Mr. Muhammad. Did that thought slip his mind? Did he forget who he was talking to? Did he forget that he previously called these same white men devils on many occasions with Mr. Muhammad? What did he think would happen as a result of his actions? Well, certain people should expect and receive immunity from physical violence. Certain people should expect and receive immunity from physical violence. And this includes total freedom from public condemnation as well, unless totally unavoidable. If the problem is grave, punishment for that problem should come from God and God alone. Malcolm should never have made those derogatory statements about Elijah Muhammad. He only heard one side of the story. He did not hear from Mr. Muhammad. But because his home was firebombed, he felt it was on the orders of Elijah, who wanted to kill him and his family. Kill him for what? For one house? Poor Malcolm. He did not yet get to the age of maturity, where punishment is sometimes reserved for the Most High. As a result, he believed Elijah would order his death and that of his family for not moving out of one of the many homes owned by the nation. He did not understand that under certain circumstances, certain individuals within a group could act against the wishes, even the direct orders of their leader. So if the firebombing of his house was done by Muslims, that does not mean that Elijah gave the order. In the Bible, there is a story about Absalom, the son of King David, one of Bob Marley's heroes. For his own reasons, Absalom rose against his father in an attempt to take over the kingdom. Maybe he disliked his father for all the robbing, raping and killing he did of men, women and children. Or was it because his father banished him from the kingdom because he killed the man who raped his sister? Or maybe he disliked his father for setting up Uriah, a long-serving and loyal member in his army, to be killed so he could get Uriah's wife, Bathsheba. When Uriah was killed, he married Bathsheba. For these reasons and maybe more, Absalom was ready to wage war against his father. As the battle was about to begin, David called his general, Joab, and told him and the army not to kill his son, that they should capture him and bring him back alive. General Joab agreed and went off to war, and during the fight, Joab captured Absalom. The general sat him down and told him that he deserved to die for rising up against his father, but his father had requested he be taken alive. Absalom, who was very nervous, now felt at ease. He thought he was going to be tortured and then killed as was customary. However, said the general, however, since this is how you repay your father for all he has done for you, you really deserve to die. And with that, he killed Absalom. When Joab returned to camp, King David eagerly inquired about his son. The general told him they had no choice, that Absalom wouldn't surrender, and they were forced to kill him. King David turned, went into his inner chamber, and wept for days. I say that to say this: Elijah would not have to order Malcolm's killing if those who did the killing were bona fide members of the Nation of Islam. They had seen the positive work in the community done by Mr. Muhammad for nearly 40 years, and they had no evidence about what Malcolm was saying against him. So it would not be far-fetched if certain members felt that this ex-criminal, who was still living on the nation's property, had passed his place, and the language by some members at the time, especially Louis Farrakhan, suggested that Malcolm should die. We should also keep in mind that the FBI and the CIA, who was unsuccessful in their previous assassination attempt on Malcolm, was still planning to kill him. But they didn't want it to result in the burning of America. They knew that Elijah Muhammad was seriously disrespected. They also knew that if Malcolm was killed at this time, especially by black folks, America would not burn, because the burners would not know the real reason for his death. They would have been led to believe that he was killed for what he said about Elijah, and not knowing the real reason was to prevent him from speaking at the UN. Since Malcolm had a moral issue with Elijah Muhammad, he should have handled it internally or leave it alone and mind his own African business, which by now was big business. Instead, he went on national television to slander and smear Elijah Muhammad. He began washing our dirty laundry with white folks without considering the fact that white folks wanted him dead. Africa was big time, and white folks didn't want any news about Africa other than theirs, especially at the United Nations. Western government didn't want him to reveal their murderous and thieving behavior on the continent. If Malcolm was killed by white, even unknown assassins, America would have paid a burning price for months, if not years. If America could burn for as long as it did for the beating of Rodney King, imagine the burn time for the death of Malcolm X. Malcolm naively made a number of negative reports to a known enemy about a respected black man who diligently worked to uplift the black community for decades without blemish. Malcolm made it easy for racist America to kill him using three of us and not pay the price for his death. We know white folks ordered the killing because we generally don't kill for slander. He was killed to prevent him from speaking at the UN and exposing the works of Western businessmen. All the above characters are guilty of racial disloyalty of one kind or another, and their legacy will pay the price depending on the level of disloyalty on the race displayed. Ashe.